We are going to talk about pacing on this episode, how to find your pace and how to stick to it. This is mostly a topic that is about strategy and performance, but we should not and will not discount equipment when it comes to pacing. And you're thinking equipment, what does that have to do with a race pace? Well, hear us out.
Yeah, a great way to trip up or disrupt a perfect cadence or steady speed is with a misshift or a dragging brake or some annoying drivetrain noise. And that is one of the reasons I always go to the starting line at Leadville and every training ride, every race with a mountain bike decked out completely with Shimano.
Yeah, precise shifting and quiet operation are two things Shimano prides itself on. It does no good to have 12 gears if you are fighting to get into 1, 2, or 3 of them, and if your derailleur is clicking away in your ear. That kind of stuff wears on you and can take you right out of an established pace that you're trying to hold between Leadville and Columbine and back.
Yeah. In addition to reliability and shifting precision, that Shimano 12-speed XTR chain is a leader in the efficiency category. In other words, and according to independent testing, its faster and more efficient chain means maintaining your pace will be a little bit easier.
For smooth, quiet, pace-keeping shifting, check out the latest Shimano drivetrain products at bike.shimano.com.
And thanks to Shimano for being the title sponsor of this show.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Shimano. Find them at bike.shimano.com. It is Season 6, Episode 10 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest, hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I am Michael Houghton, hiding to most.
And I am Fatty. Pacing is a topic we've devoted at least a couple of episodes to, and we're going to explore it some more. We've heard from Rose Grant about her pacing strategy, and we've interviewed Rose's coach about how to pace. This time, we're going to hear from another thinker from the Lifetime Grand Prix who put pacing to the test in one of the biggest off-road events in the world. Dylan Johnson is going to detail his strategy that included a commitment to allow himself to be dropped by his competitors in the name of finding his personal best.
Yeah, this is a fascinating look at how to race, and Dylan has some advice for us non-pros on how his field test can be put to use at the Leadville 100.
You know, Hadi, the bib short is one of the great inventions in cycling. I'd put him right up there with the derailleur. In fact, I'd put it ahead of the derailleur because I don't use one. We could ride without either, like I do, but being able to shift and being able to sit comfortably, both are a big deal. And with the bib short, we went from this elastic band constricting around your waist and trying to hold up our shorts to a much more secure, snug-fitting garment.
But the glorious bib short has one glaring flaw, and that is it does not take into account the needs of women. Now, we're not going to get into the why of that statement, but the women listening know exactly what we are talking about. Well, ladies, DNA has not forgotten about you. In DNA's regular store and its custom shop, you'll find the QOM bib short. This is a Leadville race-worthy bib that has what DNA calls a basket strap that allows the rider to drop those shorts without removing the jersey.
Okay, I'm writing this down, Hadi, because as you know, I hang out with a couple of women who like to ride very fast, and they don't appreciate being slowed down by bibs designed for men. Yeah, the QOM by DNA is the way to go here. These bibs also have a chamois that is designed for a woman's anatomy. In fact, DNA had a bioengineering lab in Milan work on the pad so it would offer the kind of shock absorption a woman needs.
Good thinking. Now, bibs aren't for everyone, and DNA knows that as well. That's why it also offers regular shorts in both its store and its custom shop. But ladies, don't settle for unisex. If you like bibs but wish they worked with your body, check out that QOM by DNA. They come in custom or not. You can go to dnacycling.com to learn more.
What is a good strategy for staying ahead of the cutoff times?
What do the experts say about sleeping effectively at altitude, and what do you each do?
For Leadville, hardtail or full suspension?
Yeah, good question.
Leadville Frequently Asked Questions, LFAQs, our new segment this year. We are making an attempt to answer your pressing Leadville questions most episodes this season. Our answers come without guarantee, so please use them at your discretion.
Yeah, Hottie, I think we need one of those fast read disclaimers in our LFAQs. You know, like the ones you hear at the end of pharmacy commercials, where LFAQ answers may cause pain and frustration. Ignore the hosts if you are allergic to advice. LFAQ answers should only be applied in Leadville situations and may not be used at other mountain, road, cyclocross, or track racing events. I mean, something like that ought to cover us.
Yeah, that was well done. I'll check with our lawyers on that one first, though, before we put it out. Okay. Our question this episode comes from the participants page. Scott Service posted it. He says, while hike-a-biking, do you push from the drive side or the non-drive side? He says he's heard quite a bit about the narrow goat trail section that can have fast two-way traffic, and he wants to know, do I need to learn to hike a bike from the drivetrain side for safety going up Columbine? Good one, Scott. Boy, Fatty, when you are walking, which side do you choose and why?
Yeah, it is a great question, and it has never occurred to me before, which may actually be an answer of its own. I'm pretty confident that if I tried at 11,500 feet to dismount on the right side, I would just tip over, and the remount would be even worse. At 12,000 feet, I'm not super duper graceful. So I always dismount and remount from the left side. I think it's worth mentioning that with 25 race ascents up Columbine, because I'm including the stage race that I did last year, during which I've never cleaned that, up Columbine. I've always had to get off at least once or twice. A left side dismount and remount has always worked just fine. It is a tight and narrow two-way trail, but it is not so tight that you are forced to get off the bike on what I'm going to call the goofy side.
Yeah, and I guess most of us in non-goat trail situations walk on the non-drive side just to keep from, rubbing our legs on the chain and picking up that distinctive grease mark on the calf. Not a good look, of course. And then, in cyclocross, I would say most of us are non-drive siders. We dismount and remount on the non-drive side. And that's the way I do it. Again, I would think that some of that has to do with, and this is going to sound weird as far as, cyclocross goes, has to do with basketball. So in basketball, I'm a right-handed shot, and I like to drive, up the right side if I'm going for a layup and jump off my left leg, if you will, because I feel more powerful that way. And I'm sure that's why in cyclocross, I've always, dismounted and remounted from that side because I just feel more powerful, like I can get back up on the bike that way. When it comes to the mountain bike and trails, you run into an interesting circumstance, and that's the fact that trails, can be severely off camber, which can dictate which side of the bike you may want to walk on, right? Like, I don't like having the bike like way beneath me as I'm walking with it. Say I'm on a trail, it's got a steep cant to it, and you got to get off and you're walking. Well, if it means getting on the dry side of the bike, which is not my normal side, I will if it means keeping the bike up closer to my upper body as I'm walking with. I know it's kind of a tough visual there. And I'm trying to think on the goat trail. I think going up the goat trail, the high side of the trail is always going to be on your right as you're going up it. So my natural position of non-drive side off and pushing right would be the natural way to go there. So, and it's what I've done there too on the goat trail. I just feel in a more powerful position that way as I'm pushing the bike. And yes, there's people coming down fast. And I suppose if they got out of control, I would be the first thing they'd run into. But I've never felt like I was in danger there. So, and never felt like I was so much in danger or in so much risk that I wanted to be on the other side of my bike. But it's not a bad thought, right, Fanny? I think this is worth thinking about. And like we tell a lot of our listeners is go out and give it a try. If you think you might need to do this, try it on one of your trails first. See if it works for you. You shouldn't have a problem on the goat trail if you're a non-drive side walker. I think you'll be fine there.
Yeah, Howdy, I will say as a final thought, just make sure that if you are practicing your dismount on your right side, that you also practice remounts on your right side because, anytime you get off, you got to get back on.
There is just a mental aspect to it that as you look up and you see everybody off their bike we're all off our bike and we are just pushing our bikes, and our bikes are 3 feet ahead of us, and you're practically laying down you're at such a steep angle.
So by now, you're hopefully familiar with Envy's M Series wheels, M for mountain, of course. Within the entire M Series, there are 17 different wheels. That covers everything from different wheel sizes, as in 29ers or 27.5, and the different rim widths. For instance, my favorite for Leadville, the M5, comes in both 29 and 27.5, but 17 different iterations of the M Series. That is a lot.
That is a lot. Well, that's nothing compared to the number of prototypes Envy went through to get there. Envy cranked out 1,166 concept wheels before finally arriving at the 17 you speak of. And Envy is totally transparent about the stuff they tried but set aside. Listen to some of these. There was the T-Bird rim and the bumper bead and the flex wall. Those experiments are all on the Envy website, and you can read as to why they didn't make the cut. What did was a terrific collection of wheels for all sorts of applications. If you need to climb and go fast, there's a wheel set for you. If you need to plow through the snow on 4.5-inch tires, Envy has a set for that.
And behind all of those choices are 1,166 attempts or prototypes. Some had design features that worked and some didn't. The point is, Envy took the time, the money, the energy to figure it all out. That is why we ride Envy. It is the company that does not cut corners in anything it does, especially wheel development.
If you are into the geekery of how a wheel comes to be, go to the Envy website and have a read. If you just want to pick out the best wheels for Leadville, well, go to that same website and have a look. The best carbon wheels and components are at envy.com. That's ENVE.com.
Our guest this episode is a lot like Envy in that he does the work it takes to find what works. He's very analytical. He is a thinking man's racer, and he is not afraid to say when something doesn't work.
Dylan Johnson is our guest, and he's here to talk about race pacing, how to find an appropriate pace, and how to stay on that pace. Dylan was in the Lifetime Grand Prix in the biggest gravel event of that series, and probably in the world. Dylan went with, at least for a pro, a very unique and some might say risky pacing strategy. So here's Dylan with his explanation and some translation on how you might use it for the Leadville Trail 100.
I had noticed with Unbound, and this year was my third year doing Unbound, so I actually had experience at Unbound. And part of this was me drawing on my personal experience from doing the race twice previously, and part of this was me looking at the results of the past winners. And what I noticed is that even the winners at Unbound tend to slow down throughout the race. Like the first 100 is almost always faster than the second 100. And people have a high average speed through the first half, and then their average speed dips in the second half. And that was certainly the case for me both times that I did it. The second half was not pretty both times that I did it. First half I felt okay. Second half I did not feel okay both times. First time was really ugly, and I actually have a video talking all about that if you want to hear about that too. But and it just got me thinking. It's like, theoretically, this is not the optimal pacing strategy. Theoretically, the optimal pacing strategy, if this was a time trial and you were time trialing for 200 miles, which it's not, we should put that caveat in there. It's a big caveat. But if this was a time trial, the optimal pacing strategy would be even pacing, or possibly even doing negative splits. Where you're actually doing the second half faster than you're doing the first half. But at the very least, even pacing, where you're doing, the first half and the second half at the same pace, which is how almost no one races it. So I decided that I wanted to try to do even pacing for this race, meaning that I was going to ride at this, and I actually had an average speed goal. And I was actually not doing this based off of power or heart rate. I was doing this based off of an average speed because I was trying to place high amongst the pros there. So I had an average speed goal in my mind that I theoretically thought would produce a very high result. It was basically the winning average speed from 2021. I just didn't realize that the average winning speed for 2022 would be so much higher, but I don't think I could have sustained. Obviously, I couldn't have sustained this year's winning average speed.
Only one person could.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So I recruited some riders to do this with me so that I would have other riders to draft with me. And as strong riders from the front group either had flat tires or got dropped, they would join our chasing group, which was actually very helpful. I was only riding by myself at Unbound for the last 20 minutes, and the entire rest of the race, I had other riders to draft off of, which was great. But I basically rode at the winning average speed of last year for the entire race, and I did even pacing. I rode at 20 miles per hour for the first half, 20 miles per hour for the second half. My power wasn't exactly even because there was more of a headwind on the way back, but my power was way more even this year than it has ever been in my previous 2 years doing it.
Of course, a strategy like that means you purposely got dropped.
Exactly.
You just let them go, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, you had that. If you're going to stick to that strategy, you got to go, okay, they're on their way and I'm doing my thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we start the race and they're already going too hard immediately off the bat. So pretty much off the bat, I was letting the riders just ride away from me. And it's hard to do that in a race because at this point in the race, I could totally hang on to their wheel. No problem. And I just let them go. And I told the riders around me that I recruited to do this with me, I was like, you just got to let them go. Just let them go. Like, we're going to catch these riders later. And I think, I mean, I don't know this for certain, but if I had to guess what place I was in at mile 20, I would say I was maybe in 100 to 120th place. And then by the end of the race, I just kept catching people that had paced improperly throughout the whole race. And I made my way all the way up to 25th place, which kind of goes to show you how badly everybody else paces a 200-mile gravel race.
Yeah, I think you would probably find some of the same situation at Leadville, too. Like, people get pacing wrong. I mean, it happens everywhere. People just pace. Everyone gets excited, goes out fast. They fire a lot of bullets, light a lot of matches, and then coming home, man, you're just tanked. Now, looking back on it for you, was this strategy... was it the right move for you? Do you think you could have done better any other way than the way you chose?
So I go back and forth on this because obviously I can't, jump in a time machine and do the race again and try the normal strategy, which the normal strategy is to just stay with the front group as long as you can. And then when you get dropped, do whatever you can to get to the finish line as fast as possible, which for most people at that point means that they're just crawling. Like, they've spent way too many matches trying to stay with the front group, and they are, by the time they get dropped, whether that's at mile 80 or mile 120 or mile 180, they're just doing damage control. So if I had done the normal strategy, I can't tell you what would have happened. I don't know when I would have gotten dropped. I don't know how bad a shape I would have been in when I did get dropped. So it's really hard for me to say. I would have to guess, though, that doing this strategy, I probably finished higher than if I had done the normal strategy. I probably, if I had to guess, just given how... because I raced with these riders all year long, and Unbound was actually arguably the hardest competition of any Lifetime Grand Prix race of the series. Because there were riders from Europe there, and it was just a higher level of competition. I mean, what probably would have happened is maybe around mile 100 or mile 120, I would have gotten dropped, and I would have been in bad shape. And struggled to the finish line and I don't know, maybe ended up like 30th or 35th place.
So what is the lesson from this for the Leadville racer?
I mean, I think you could 100% do the same thing for Leadville. And it would probably work even better for Leadville because while drafting is still important for Leadville, there are definitely sections that you can draft. It's a lot more climbing, and drafting is less important at Leadville than it is at Unbound. So I mean, what I would do is if you're trying to implement this strategy, just know, first of all, you gotta kind of come up with a power output that you and again, this is a scenario where I would totally use your power meter to execute this. You got to realize that your power is going to be lower than it's going to be at sea level, and you should probably have an idea of what is sustainable for you for this duration at sea level, and then adjust it down for altitude. And just know that when you're going up that first climb, when you're going up that second climb, you're going to be getting dropped by people, and you could stay with them, but you're just going to let them go. And this is so hard for people to do. And it's way easier said than done because everybody feels like $1 million on that first climb on race day. But you just got to let them go. You just got to let it. You're going to see them in an hour. You're going to see them in 2 hours. You're going to see them in 3 hours. You're going to be passing them back. And when you pass them back, they're gonna wish that they had stayed back with you on that first climb.
The difficulty here, of course, is the fact that the Leadville course changes so much. Like 1 second you're on a 20% climb, then you're going down a 15% descent, and it's up, down, except for the pipeline section. There's a lot of dramatic changes, so it makes it hard to create that pacing target. Where at Unbound, you've got that, right? Average is average. Like you're kind of always going to be a lot closer to average at Unbound at any particular moment than you will be at Leadville. So how does the racer set a pacing target in hopes of, maintaining a pace from the time that Ken fires his gun to the time you come up the red carpet?
At Unbound, I think doing a average speed pacing target makes a lot more sense for the reasons that you just laid out. If you've seen 1 mile of Unbound, you've seen 200 miles of it. It's basically the same scenery the entire time. Not the case at Leadville at all. So I wouldn't have an average speed pacing target at Leadville. I would have a power pacing target at Leadville. Possibly a heart rate pacing target at Leadville. Because the average speed changes a lot. I mean, when you hit Columbine, your average speed is going to drop off a cliff, right? Just as an example, right? So for example, if you were saying like, oh, I need to get to the halfway point of this race in this amount of time, and you're rolling through pipeline and you're like, oh man, I'm making great time. You could hit Columbine and all of that could completely go out the window, for example, right? So I wouldn't have an average speed pacing target. I would have a power-based pacing target.
But even with the context of the power-based target, you're going to need plenty of latitude, right? Because once you get on Columbine, you're just naturally going to be putting out more power. It's hard to hold a pipeline target on Columbine, correct?
Yeah, and actually riding climbs at a higher power output than a flat or a downhill is actually theoretically faster than holding the same power output for the entire race. Like if you have an undulating time trial, it is actually faster to go slightly harder on the climb and slightly easier on the descent and the flat than putting out the exact same power output the entire time, regardless of what terrain you're on. And you got to take that into account too. I would go slightly harder on the climbs and slightly easier on the flats. And then on the descents, you're probably not going to be pedaling.
Yeah. So a sliding scale, so to speak.
Sure.
One more on Unbound, though. I think the thing that should be noted here is that your time in 2022 would have done what in previous years? Like you would have been way up on the standings compared to previous years. So that should be noted here, right? Along with the strategy you used.
Sure. So the time that I finished Unbound in this year was it was 9 hours 58 minutes something, just under 10 hours. Going under 10 hours had only been done once ever in the history of that race, and I believe that was in 2019. And my time from this year would have beaten that time. So the time that I finished the Unbound in this year was the fastest time that Unbound had ever been done in, except 24 people did it faster than me that day. Now I want to point out here that they changed the course every single year, and the conditions were very different this year as well. And so it's not quite like Leadville, where Leadville, they make slight variations to the course, but it's largely the same course from year to year. So you can very easily compare Leadville times from one year to another year. Can't quite do that the same way at Unbound. Other than the fact that it is all gravel and it is 200 miles ish. You can roughly be like, oh, it took me 12 hours, took me 13, but you got to take that into account. So I got to throw that out there.
Well, I think the point here is that race your race, right? Pacing works, race your race. It may be the thing to do for a pro like Dylan. I mean, I think he's still thinking about that. Certainly it's something for the rest of us. Race your race.
Yeah, so the strategy that I used for Unbound, I would say that it's quite a dice roll for a pro who's planning to get up very high finish, who has is probably going to be in the top 20 or the top 10. I mean, the higher you plan on finishing up, the more of a dice roll my strategy is for a pro. I would say for your average finisher, for your mid-pack finisher, for your person just trying to finish the race, not even necessarily trying to get a good time, but their goal is just to finish, this is not a dice roll strategy. This is the strategy that you should be using.
Well, and it does work for pros. Pro women have used this. Rose Grant won Leadville Trail 100 twice using a very similar strategy. She paced herself. She let the front ladies just go when they wanted to go, and she said, I'll reel them back in when my pace catches up with them. So it does work. It does work on many levels.
Hottie, of course, a pacing strategy isn't worth a damn if you fail to fuel it. Even staying out of the red requires the correct amount of calories and fluid. And like with your riding, you want to pace yourself when it comes to nutrition.
Not enough, and you might blow up, and too much at once, and you might throw up, is one way you might want to put it. So while you are working on your pace, please work on how much food and drink you are taking in. Start by going to the feed and stocking up on the race fuels you know you like and the ones you'd like to try.
Yeah, for instance, I generally take in Martin and Goo gels and drink mixes on race day, and that takes up a majority of my normal orders from the feed. But I'm also interested in trying more bars during the first half of the race, so my feed boxes now also include a wide range of gels, bars, and energy mixes from other companies. I don't know yet what's going to make the final cut, but that is the great thing about the feed. I can add them to an order and then just sort of adjust my weekly, monthly, whatever order to what works for my stomach.
In fact, I was reading on the Feed's blog an article on that very topic, that bars early on in a long race and gels later is one way to attack this thing. Regarding gels, the Feed suggests mixing and matching brands and flavors. This should reduce flavor fatigue and mix things up, and since the Feed carries such a wide variety, it's really easy to do in a single order.
Yeah, and the Feed is obviously the best place to get the nutrition you're going to train and race with, easily, automatically, and always at a great price. The Feed is the largest online marketplace for athletes to shop sports nutrition, high-performance supplements, and recovery gear. Everything you need to make your workout as good as it can be.
Claim your $80 annual credit at thefeed.com/Leadville. Register your email, verify your phone number, then spend your first Feed credit of $20 right away. Okay, more with Dylan Johnson. We're going to talk bike setup with Dylan now. Now, we recorded with Dylan before Lifetime made its equipment announcement, so you will hear Dylan talk about aero bars. Aero bars are now not allowed at Unbound and Leadville, but we thought his points were interesting, shall we say, an op-ed, And Dylan does have some good advice for racers considering extensions no matter where they are used. Before we let you go, Dylan, we want to talk about bikes. We love talking about bikes and bike setup, and this is another area where you love to tinker and try new things. And we saw that at Shawamigan. I love getting through that name. Every time I get through that name, it's a victory for me. So Shawamigan. Tell us about your bike at Shawamigan, and we're going to get to the Leadville question on this bike too, folks. So tell us about this Shawamigan bike. It's a pretty special and unique setup.
Yeah, so Shawamigan is a unique race. 40 miles, mostly on cross-country ski trails, but obviously the race doesn't take place in the winter, so there's no snow on the ski trails. And cross-country ski trails in the summer, while they're not particularly technical to ride on, they're still very bumpy. So I wouldn't say that a gravel bike is a great call for this race, because you're going to get bumped around a lot. But there's nothing about the course that's overly technical. There's not really any single track. There's not a lot of technical maneuvers, a lot of technical descents that you have to do. So what I did is I took my hardtail mountain bike, which is the Factor Lando hardtail, and I put drop bars on it, which was actually pretty easy to do with SRAM ETAP. I just had to use the SRAM ETAP road shifters, and they set up perfectly to the mountain bike drivetrain. And there you go. I had a drop bar mountain bike. And so my reasoning for doing this, I had a number of people ask me, like, why is that better for Shawamigan? I don't understand. Like, why not just use regular mountain bike bars? Like, I understand it's not technical, but why do you think that drop bars is going to be faster? The average speed at Shawamigan is typically between 17 and 20 miles per hour. And at that speed, aerodynamics absolutely matters. So being in the drop bars versus being in a regular mountain bike handlebar position is quite a big difference aerodynamically. And I just thought that I could be in a much more aerodynamic position if I had the drop bars, which I think was the case. I just don't think that Shawamigan as a race really suits my skill set, because it's a 2-hour race, and I haven't done a 2-hour race in probably 5 years. And back when I did 2-hour races, I quickly realized that 2-hour races were not genetically suit my skill set. There was a brief period of time where I was trying to be a cross-country mountain bike racer, and I quickly switched over to ultra endurance racing. I tended to do better in that. But I still didn't do bad at Shawamigan. I think I finished 20th place or something. So very similar to Leadville, given the competition.
Yeah, and well, you guys got totally surprised by a freak storm that moved in early in the morning, and it's made the conditions sloppy, so the whole day kind of changed. I know Fatty wants to ask a question, but what with the bar? Give us just an idea what kind of bars you ended up putting on the bike.
Yeah, I had Control Tech. I don't know what the exact model was. They were 40 centimeter wide bars.
40, wow. Yeah.
I usually run 38 centimeter wide bars on my gravel bike, which is both 40 and 38 is narrower than you're typically seeing on gravel bikes, but narrower is a little bit more aerodynamic. And I thought for the mountain bike, I'll go wide. I'll go 40s, right? Instead of 38s. I thought that was fine. The conditions were horrible. It was really muddy. But honestly, cyclocrossers ride muddy conditions and drop bars all the time. I didn't feel like I was necessarily losing anything in the mud with the drop bars. However, I do think that it made that bike, it gave that bike a little bit less of an advantage, just because the average speed wasn't as high, right? And I wanted the average speed to be as high as it could possibly be, because I wanted all the aerodynamic benefit that I could possibly get.
So are you considering a drop bar mountain bike in Leadville next year?
Yeah, so I have gotten that question as well. And so here's what I'll say about it, is that Leadville is not a particularly technical mountain bike race. A lot of people do it on hardtails. I think some people even did it on their gravel bike. I think, at least for me personally, maybe there's some people that are really skilled at riding with drop bars, but I rode that bike quite extensively before Schwamigan, and I rode it on actual mountain bike trails. And at least for me and my skill set, I was quite a bit slower on technical descents with the drop bars than with regular mountain bike bars. And I think that you would be losing a significant amount of time coming down Powerline, coming down Columbine, maybe some of the other descents on the course.
Sugarloaf.
Yeah, I think you would be losing time with the drop bars. And I guess the question is, would you be able to make that time up in the flatter sections of the course where you could be in the drops? Personally, the handlebar setup that I used for Leadville is the handlebar setup that I think is the fastest for that race. And that is a normal pair of mountain bike bars with a set of mini aero bars. And I also used Control Tech aero bars for Leadville. And they're kind of very small triathlon, draft legal triathlon bars. And the reason I use the very small ones is because they're very lightweight and you're not in them for a long period of time. So they don't necessarily need to be the most comfortable things in the world. But I actually think that is the fastest handlebar setup for Leadville, just because you can rip down the descents as fast as you can ride them. And then on the sections where you can get in the aero bars, being in the aero bars is actually more aerodynamic than being in the drops.
Yeah, Fatty and I, we've talked a lot about drop bars and bar ins and aero bars on the show, but we've never recommended them. We've stayed away from that. So, Dylan, is this a pro-only move, or could this trickle down?
I don't recommend them either. I don't recommend them for anyone. I don't recommend them to pros because they go against the spirit of gravel. And also, if you're using them, then that's if everybody starts using them, that's less of an advantage that I have when I use them. If they just become standard equipment, right? If aero bars are just standard equipment that everyone's using, then I get less of an advantage when I use them. So I don't recommend them at all either. And I also don't recommend them for people that don't know what they're doing with them, because if you, please don't be one of these people who throws aero bars on the day before Unbound or the day before Leadville, and you've never used them before, but your favorite pro decided to put them on his or her bike, and now you decided to put them on the day before, and you don't know how to use them. Please don't be one of those people. You're not gonna know how to use it. Your back is probably going to hurt. There could be some safety concerns. I don't recommend using aero bars either.
I'm interested in you answering the question that everyone asks themselves: what am I going to do better next year? Maybe for the whole Grand Prix, but in particular for Leadville, what are you going to do that is better or smarter, that is going to put you further up the field next year?
For Leadville, I think that I'm going to take my own advice and try to pace better. I don't think that my pacing was terrible this year, but I did. My power did start to suffer in the last 2 hours, and I think that had I taken my own advice and actually paced a little bit better, maybe tried to pace more like I did at Unbound, then I probably would have, I wouldn't have been as high up at the top of Columbine, but I bet you I would have made up more time coming back on that second leg. As far as Leadville goes, I think that's probably what I would do, is try to work on my pacing.
How about flip side of that coin? What are you going to do absolutely the same? What worked great?
I thought my bike setup was great. I just talked about my bike setup in terms of the handlebars, but I used a hardtail mountain bike with a dropper post. I know a lot of people feel like they don't need a dropper post at Unbound or Leadville, but I think that the dropper post that I have, the Fox Transfer SL, is like 150 grams heavier than my normal straight post. And personally, I I don't care what race it is. If it's a mountain bike race where I'm riding my mountain bike, I've got a dropper post on at this point. I think that there is time to be made up on some of the descents at Leadville with the dropper post.
Yeah, my prediction 2023 is going to be the tipping point year. I think we are going to start seeing between 40 and 50% of racers with dropper posts starting this year. It will be the first year that I have a dropper post on. So, yeah, I'm getting used to it. Yeah.
We ran a dropper poll last year because we did talk about droppers as a use case for Leadville. And I thought, there's no way they're going to get like 2 people saying they're running a dropper. I was surprised how many said they would run a dropper. Now, usually it came down to this, Dylan. They said, well, it's on the bike already. I still want to hassle with it. I'm just going to leave it on and run with it. And I thought, well, okay, that makes sense. Just leave it on and run with it. But tell us, as somebody who uses a dropper and has used it at Leadville, like obviously if you get into the single track section, the 2 miles that they give us, obviously going to lower your dropper there. I would think descending Sugarloaf as you're headed home, or that rough rocky area, lower the dropper. How about on those seated descents, like Columbine, for instance? Do you drop the dropper and sit down low, or how do you use it in sections? Where else do you try and to use the dropper in its down mode? That not the obvious stuff.
Yeah, so first of all, let me clarify. When I say, I'm going to use my dropper at Leadville, it's not because I don't want to hassle with taking it off and that, that's a pain in the ass. I think that it's actually faster, at least for me. And I do understand that different riders have different skill sets. Some riders are better at descending with a straight post than others. Personally, I find that I can descend quite a bit faster with the dropper post. So, I think that coming down Powerline is probably the most technical descent of the race. I think I had my dropper post down for the majority of that and probably went a bit faster because of it. I had my dropper post down for the majority of Columbine. And then there are other flat or there are other downhill road sections that are not particularly technical, but if you have your dropper post down and you're sitting down on your seat, it's essentially like doing a super tuck. It's like you're doing a super tuck, but it's not as dangerous as doing a super tuck, right? Doing a super tuck coming down Columbine with people coming up the other side is quite dangerous. I would not recommend that anybody does that. But if you have a dropper post, that's a safe way to get quite a bit more aerodynamic coming down Columbine,
or just May Queen for that matter, right? It's there are a lot of places. For every uphill, there's an equivalent downhill in this out and back course. And I really don't think, as I am becoming comfortable with the dropper post, I think that I will engage it on all of them. I don't see any reason why I wouldn't.
Yeah, so a buddy of mine and I were doing some calculations about how much a dropper post actually cost you going up Columbine, for example. I think it was maybe a second or two, depending on how much. It depends on how much of a weight penalty you're giving up with your dropper post. And when I'm talking about 150 grams, going from a straight post to a dropper post, it's maybe 2 or 3 seconds going up Columbine. If I think about it, okay, I'm losing 2 or 3 seconds on the climb. There is no way that I'm not at least 2 or 3 seconds faster on the way back down with the dropper post. At least for me and how I descend, I know that I could make that time up just coming back down the other side of Columbine, if not make up more time.
It's the year of the dropper. I tell you, make a prediction. You were 16th. You were 16th this year. How far do you think you can move up next year?
I would love to make it into the top 10. I think that would probably be my goal.
That would be huge. This is a race with, as you say, a lot of big names and some pretty remarkable prestige. So, you're to be congratulated for hitting for getting in, for one thing, and for getting as high as you did. I hope you do move up.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Big thanks again to Dylan Johnson. He has such great insights on pacing, dropper posts, and more. Yes, he said he likes using aero bars, and again, this year, he and the rest of us will not be allowed to use them at Leadville.
We will have more from Dylan this season. Dylan has some interesting advice on another topic we love to obsess about, and that is altitude. Okay, let's wrap this episode. Fatty and I are on social media, most notably Instagram. I am at Michael Houghton there. You'll find both Fatty and me on the Facebook Leadville 100 mountain bike participants page. It's more Fatty than me, but we're kind of both there. And if you want to have a conversation, join our Slack channel. You'll find it over at leadville.fm/Slack.
If you like this show, and you better like this show, go wherever you listen and give us a 5-star rating, write us a review, and then you can check out all the ways to find the show, whatever way you listen to podcasts, over at leadville.fm. Good luck in your riding, your racing, and your recovery. Thanks for listening. We're going to see you in just a few short months at the starting line.